Piramal and Nandini for agreeing to do this. We couldn't have asked for a better family, who could, because they have the legacy of having built large enterprises, and now it is being passed on to the next generation. So the best father-daughter duo in India Inc. is here with us, guys. Please, let's have a huge round of applause for them. Mr. Piramal, you've built Piramal Enterprises from scratch. What lessons did you learn, along the way? And how have you passed on those lessons to, your children, especially Nandini? And Nandini, if you could go next and talk about how you've applied those lessons, in running those enterprises.
I think all the businesses that we've had, there is a purpose which we all talk about within the organization, which we talk to all the people. And that is that doing well and doing good and making a positive difference to the world around us by living our values. I think that is important for us, the purpose behind it, why we are in business. And so our belief is that a business has to do well, and it has to, in other words, it has to do well on financial metrics. But not only that, it also has to do good to the world, so that the world is in whatever area we are in, we leave something better than what we came in it. And that's what we measure, both doing well and doing good, and by living our values. So I think that is perhaps the most important lesson. Talking about, and this is as relevant to us in our business as it is in our philanthropy. Because philanthropy also, yes, everybody does. You are doing well, let's take that. But you should also do good. So we measure both impact of the philanthropy as well as what we are doing. Similarly, I think the next is that it is on values. What are the values that are important to us? I think one we have actually again laid out values, and our people are aware of it, but the best thing is to put it into practice. So one is integrity. What do we define by integrity? It is what you think, you say, and what you say, you do. So there's alignment between thought, speech, and action. And one more thing I'll highlight as far as values is concerned is the concept of trusteeship. Trusteeship means that we are just trustees, or that there is certain wealth, or there is certain, who's a trustee? Person who has been given some wealth in a trust, or whether it's a business, whatever is in a trust, for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And who are our beneficiaries? Our beneficiaries are our customers, our employees, our shareholders, as well as society. So everything we do as trustees to ensure that we work to the maximum long-term benefit of all these stakeholders. I think these are some of the values. One more last value is to always have the courage as a leader to travel the road less traveled, to go on that road. So the ability or the courage to take risks, yes, you may be wrong sometimes, but it's that's what makes ultimately the difference.
Nandini?
I think just following on from that, I think I fundamentally believe that the values create value. And it is incredibly important that they're not just words on the wall. I think there's a famous professor, Professor Sumantra Ghosal, who actually had this interview. He's like, culture is about the smell of the place. It's when you walk in to an office or into a meeting, how do people treat each other? How do you make those values come to life? And one example, in a way, is when we talk about integrity. In pharma companies, you'll see, you'll have seen a lot of headlines of data integrity. What does it mean? Ideally, the regulator should know, and your patients should know, that the data is the data. It was kind of put in and entered in when it was said it was entered in by who the person is. And for us, that's an epitome of integrity, which means that the data does what it says it does. And as a result of that, our quality record is pretty amazing, because we have probably hundreds of customer audits, double digit, at least 40 to 50 regulator audits across our plants, and we've never had a warning letter from the FDA. And I think that's a record that we stand by, and it's because of the intent and the values, and I think that creates value.
Right. Also, the landscape has really changed from when Mr. Piramal started, because, they were the OG entrepreneurs, they were category creators. But it is very different for someone like you, Nandini, where, today the challenges are very, very different. The incumbents are being challenged by newer entrants. So, with that changing landscape, how has the, entire approach to, leading the business changed?
So I think when you were building a business in the 80s and 90s, it was more of a closed economy and more of a license Raj. I think that has changed. It is easier to do business in India, but we're also more global. So for example, we have factories and manufacturing in the US, the UK, as well as India. So, we're running on pretty much a 24-hour clock. And so that means it changes how you do business, it changes who you interact with, and it changes who your customers are. And you as an organization have to adapt. So for example, a lot of our customers come to our plants, and they would expect the line engineer to be speaking perfect English. So, that's the kind of conversations that they want to have. And you think, 30 years ago, they wouldn't be speaking English in the factory, just as a small example.
Right. And Mr. Piramal, how do people of your generation went through different kind of struggles? How do you reinvent yourself as an entrepreneur? Because every decade the landscape is changing. What have your learnings been, and how are you trying to reinvent yourself?
So really, the way I try to reinvent myself is meeting people, different types of people, both in India and abroad. Fortunately, I have the benefit of meeting very smart people. It's not only smart, that intellectually smart or who have a very high IQ, but people who understand what businesses are like, what's happening globally. So that is one way of really keeping in touch with what is happening. We also have many relationships with partners in India, with partners abroad. You meet them. I think to me that is there. I also do a bit of reading, not as much as I should, but yes, that is another way. And attending some conferences, whether it's the World Economic Forum or a few others. I think that's the way to just keep reinventing, because one thing is true, that things are changing a lot. So in all this change, what I think remains constant is the values. They are like the really North Star that doesn't change. And I think once you keep that in mind, it just helps.
Right. Before your session, we spoke to Anant about leadership style, and I'm sure the audience is also curious to know what your leadership style is perceived as more strategic and more visionary. That's how we perceive it, and Nandini is perceived as more innovative and trying to do newer things. How do you really there is matching of minds when it comes to running the business together?
I don't know whether that is the definition, and that definition is correct, but I can just say, I think my, how do I say, my leadership style is, yes, my leadership style is hopefully getting people involved, giving enough responsibility to them, and believing in people, young people, giving them opportunities, allowing them to make mistakes, because I know I have made many mistakes and I continue to make them. And I think to that extent that is, and trust people unless something, I mean, which is really wrong after a long time. So if that is the style, maybe that's how it is.
Right. And Nandini?
So I tend to be very structured. I like lots of data, and I like to understand and build a framework in my mind. But I think it's also about collaboration and trusting people who are experts in their area, because as the businesses become more complex, there's no way a generalist can really understand and get into the nitty-gritties of manufacturing, and that's the manufacturing head's job. So I think trusting the people, giving them freedom, I think that's in a way we're quite similar, but also encouraging collaboration.
Right. And I'm sure it's very challenging also, because when Mr. Piramal built businesses, for him, he was the first-gen entrepreneur. When you are inheriting those and trying to build on it, the challenges are different. How do you ensure that the legacy stays, and how do you really build upon them?
So I think this is one of the things. I think values create value, and I think that's the culture, and that's what makes it real. So I'll give you an example. I think we had a team member of my dad's who would come and talk to a lot of our pharma people. And he's like, yeah, this seems pretty much like the old days. The kind of the values and the culture that you have is not any different to what we had even when he was more involved in the pharma business.
But is that a baggage? Do you perceive it as?
I think I actually agree with him. I think they're constant, and I think they'll always be your North Star, and you have to continue to live by them.
Right. Mr. Piramal, how do you see? Do you see it as more challenging for them to build on what you've already, what is your take on it?
I think everybody has to go through their own challenges. There are opportunities and there are challenges. When I began my business career, we had a textile business, and I was thrust into really leadership at a very young age because of certain family, let's say, tragedies. If I can say, my father passed away when I was very young, and so did my eldest brother, who was the chairman of the group, and textile was going through a difficult time. But that was a different time, and one could go from one business. I went into pharma and so on. But each one has their own challenges, so it's not that what is more difficult, what is not. I think this is part of life.
Are you passing on the risk-taking ability to the next generation?
It is for people, each one is also made differently. So whether I'm not deliberately passing on anything, it's for both. My kids are now running their businesses independently. It's for them to see if they like something, they will do it. Otherwise,
you've just had 30 years of conversations at the dinner table, which still continue.
Right. And how did you arrive at, who inherits what? How did you know that, this piece of business should be run by, say, Nandini, and the other piece by...
So it's actually just the way the interest of each one of them was, that I know that Nandini was always interested in the pharma business right from the beginning, and therefore her deep understanding of that business. She, after, she's studied at Oxford and then went to Stanford to do her business school and then joined McKinsey. So she had a wide experience of this. And fortunately, her husband is also somebody who she met at Stanford, who also worked in McKinsey in pharma. So he also had a particular knowledge of pharma and an inclination for pharma. So it just worked out like that. On the other hand, Anand was, whilst he was studying at Harvard, he wanted to do real estate. He started with real estate, and then real estate, financial services to some extent are very closely related. So that's how he's got interest in that.
Right. And how do you handle conflict, situations? Because, when there are, there isn't meeting of mind, say a decision needs to be taken about a certain business strategy. And if Nandini has a differing view and you have a differing view, how do you really tackle that within the family?
So my view, it depends at what stage you are. I think now both Nandini and Anand have got enough experience that my view is that I may differ with something, which is not very often, but if I do, I just express my opinion. I may say it once, twice, but ultimately the decision is theirs. I don't want to take responsibility now for the actions after that. That's how I've been brought up. I was given responsibility very early in life. I made the decisions, right or wrong. I got either the credit or I, made mistakes. So I believe that's the best way to do it.
Right. A lot of legacy businesses have suffered because of stagnation in their core business. You have constantly innovated and, gotten into newer lines of businesses. Do we see, more such businesses that you are excited about? What are the two themes, say, of future, say 10 years down the line, the sunrise sectors that you are excited about?
So fortunately for us, the sectors we are in are actually both in some ways sunrise. Or they are mature in some ways. If you look at it, both pharma and financial services are very mature businesses. But actually the nature of the business is changing every day. So whether it is is it sunrise? I think yes, there are so many new activities happening in pharma. You see the amount of change, the amount of innovation that takes place in pharma is probably more than anywhere else. And we read so many new technologies coming in the pharma space. And the ultimate purpose of pharma is the same, which is how do you alleviate human suffering? But the methodology changes. So in that sense, they are always new and it is always a sunrise. Similarly, financial services, the amount of change that is taking place on a daily basis is significant. So in that sense, I would say that these are really businesses where you have to always remain on the top to understand what the changes are or what are likely to be the changes, and you come and adapt yourself to that.
Right. A lot of founders suffer from, lack of succession planning, where, we have seen a lot of businesses and we keep writing on those, on a daily basis, are either getting sold to strategics or private equity investors because there's, the next gen is not interested in running those businesses. So what would be your one advice to founders on succession planning, because you've successfully done that yourself. So what is that one advice that you would want to give?
My only advice is that you have to give the choice to your children. And ultimately, I believe that each one must do what their own internal passion is, or what we call swadharma. If you have to do what is really you're passionate about. If you're passionate about running your business, you should do that. But you don't have to force the person, the next gen, that you have to do my business. If they're passionate about music, they should do music. So, I believe in that, because that is the only way you can be successful. And at the end of the day, what is the most important thing in a human being's life is to be happy. And you can only be happy if you're internally happy. You cannot get happy by outside this thing. It's internal. And that happiness comes only if you pursue your swadharma or your real passion. So that's my belief. So some people's kids, like in my case, both my children wanted to do business and therefore they are in business. But if somebody wanted to be an artist, so be it.
Right. It's interesting that you spoke about Swadharma. A lot of your, life is driven by this entire influence of Vedanta and, Bhagavad Gita. If you can talk about, say 2 lessons from Bhagavad Gita that have been your driving force in running businesses. And then we can, maybe Nandini, you can also talk about it. It would be great.
So if you look at it, all our values, all our purpose is really nothing new. It's all based on what has been said thousands of years ago. I think we need to appreciate that the Gita was taught to a young person who was the most successful archer at the prime of his, let's say, skill when he was in his 20s. And Arjuna, who it was taught to, was in the midst of a battlefield. So therefore, those lessons are not told to somebody who's sitting in the Himalayas or in the mountains in isolation. It is for everyday life. So that's what, so when I said about purpose, this is from the Gita. What is it? That you have to also make a difference to the world around us. We are actually privileged to be born as a human being. And we owe it to society, we owe it to nature to give back and make the world a better place. That is what the Gita says. The Gita also talks about, let's say, about doing, the Gita also talks about focusing on action, not worrying about the result. Because what is result? It is only the fruit of the action. Only when you lay a seed into the ground will you get the fruit. And when you lay the seed, you water the plant. That's how the fruit comes. I can't think I'm getting a fruit and just chase it without laying the seed. So that's it. The courage to take on things which are different is again in the Gita. So I can go on. There's everything that at least I know in life is I have learned from there.
Right. Nandini, Anand spoke about, the previous session, the, need for spirituality, in equal amount. What is your take on spirituality and how important it is for an entrepreneur?
So I'll actually say I'm not very spiritual, but I am someone who believes in the necessity of purpose and the necessity of living your life according to your own personal values. So I think those two are how I would live my life.
What are the 2 values that are driving you as an entrepreneur?
I think I would agree with sort of integrity and trusteeship amongst the 2 that I think make a big difference.
Right. Mr. Piramal, how do you, balance the need for professionalization and merit-based leadership with the importance of family legacies and values and, succession?
Sorry, say it again.
Yeah. How do you balance the need for professionalization and merit-based leadership, with the importance of family legacy, on one hand, you have to pass on the family legacy, and on the other hand, you have to also ensure professionalization and, merit-based leadership.
I think there is no conflict between the 2. First of all, I think if I look at my own kids, as I said, both of them have been well qualified. Okay, just because you've been to a Harvard or a Stanford doesn't make you a good, successful person, but they've also got the right experience. And ultimately, this is what I don't understand. When you talk of professionalism, on one hand, you say that we should have employee stock option. That ties them. Who has the biggest stock option in a company is the family. And if you're a smart family owner, you will realize that it is in your own vested interest to see that you have the best talent. Because who gets the most benefit? The family gets it because you have the largest shareholding. So I don't find there is any conflict between professional and family. That just because you're a professional, does it mean that you will do better? No, it's not true. And honestly, sometimes in the most difficult times, the family will stick it out. Very often I've seen, it's not always, but I've seen professionals leave because they have options to go elsewhere. The family has no other option. So I think it is a mix. It's a smart family person who is smart would see that the best people work for her or him and continue to prosper.
Right. So skin in the game is very important, like Mr. Piramal said. So Nandini, building on that, when you confront difficult situations, like he said that, often a professional manager versus, say, a family, how have you tackled those? If you can, help us with some example or an anecdote, that would be great.
I mean, I think it's important to have not just, you may call it a board of advisors, but it's people that you trust, that you can be vulnerable with, and actually then have those discussions. Because, it may not be your public company board, because they also have other responsibilities, but you have to have mentors, friends, and family that you can be completely honest with, and that can therefore give you good advice. And they have to know you, they have to understand your business, and they have to then also be, sometimes also say, like, look, this is what you kind of have to suck up and do, and you just put your head to the ground and you do it.
Right. And Mr. Piramal, at what point does one need to plan for succession? What is that inflection point when you really have to start thinking about succession and ensure that you are building a roadmap for the next generation to step in?
I don't know if there is a specific time or age. I think it's just that when you find that if you are having a succession with your family, that they are ready to take up the responsibility. And I find that over time, we started both, as I said, with both Nandini and Anand. They were getting more and more responsibility, and they were taking it on. And therefore, at some time, actually, it's more important for people who have been used to running the business like I have been, to actually just step away. That is more important, I find. And very often people think that, oh, I know all of everything and my next generation will make mistakes. So what? Even if they do make mistakes, it's fine. We all have made them in our life. So it's better to, I think it's more important yourself to know that you have to step aside and actually do it.
Right. That's really interesting. To know when to step aside. I think on that note, we would end this session.